Yeah, we're here to present you a little bit Chris the Swiss. It's a feature-length film for cinema. It's half animation, half documentary, with archives as well, of course. The animations are black and white, and the sound, well, we did it in Dolby Atmos, the mix, which is a bit kind of stupid because it's not a blockbuster, and most of the cinemas that are not blockbuster cinemas don't play Dolby Atmos. Still, I'm very proud of it. The animation techniques are 2D on computer Cintiq, a bit of 3D elements just to simplify the process. It's a 4-country co-production. Main production country is Switzerland. Then we have Croatia, as you heard, Nucleus Film, Mayade from Germany, and 4 Films, Finland. So I just show you shortly the teaser or the trailer of the project so that you get a bit more an impression what we're talking about. No.
I've seen young guys who fight for an idea, but I have seen those things on the other side too. Politicians who say, you were right, you were wrong.
I remember that something very important was happening. More than 20 years have passed since my cousin Chris died, and I'm still obsessed by his story. I want to understand why Chris, a young Swiss man who grew up in a peaceful country, joined a faraway war and ended up dead. They returned your notebooks with your body, reports from the war.
Cristian era una persona que lo que decía, cuando veía un muerto civil, se preguntaba, ¿están matando civiles? Esto no es una guerra.
Journalists, don't shoot!
Es hat einfach Journalisten gegeben, die wurden nicht mit der Tatsache fertig, dass sie als Zuschauer dort sind, dass sie als Beobachter dort sind.
You threw yourself headfirst into the mayhem of war. What did you want to be? A mercenary? A journalist?
So as you might have realized, Chris the Swiss is the story of my cousin Christian Württemberg, who in the beginning of the 90s went to former Yugoslavia as a young war journalist. He was at the beginning of his career, actually, and he went there to write about the war. And a few months after he went there, he joined the mercenary group, an international mercenary group that was fighting on the Croatian side. This group was established by a Spanish former journalist as well, and was said to be responsible for ethnic cleansing in the area of Croatia, so against Serbs. And it was also said to be involved in arms and drug dealings and to be financed by the ultra-Catholic organization Opus Dei. What is fascinating is the wrong word, but what is like very touching, or what was for me very touching, is that, former Yugoslavia, the area of former Yugoslavia is very close to where I come from, Switzerland, and we are actually now, as you know, of course, we are here. So it's not in Africa, it's not somewhere where we cannot really connect because people are so different. So Chris, as a young journalist, went there, and after some months, we as family, we did not know where he was actually, because it was before mobile phones, it was before mails, so he just disappeared. And then we as family heard that he came back, that he was killed, that he was murdered, strangled. When he was found in a uniform. So that's when we learned that he joined this mercenary group. That was too early, sorry. When Chris died, I was actually still a young girl, and I kind of learned from his dad, from the perspective of this little girl that I was back then. And I still have these very impressive images that, I learned it from the perspective of a child, and I still have very impressive images. So when I arrived, or when I reached approximately the same age like Chris when he died, all of a sudden the story starts to hit me again, because I started to compare my life, which was so different to his life, of course. Because when I was still a little girl, he was really like my childhood hero. I was looking up to him. He was an adventurous type. He was in Africa with the lions, I thought back then. Actually, later I learned he was not with the lions, but he was with the Southwest African Territorial Force, which is an apartheid army. So it was a bit different. My background is actually animation background. So when I had to decide what kind of final project I wanted to make, I decided to tell this story in a short film and focus really on the perspective of the little girl I was back then. So it's not talking about the war or anything. And I just show you a short excerpt of the diploma film I made like ages ago.
Das hier bin ich. Das hier ist Rigi, mein großer Cousin. Ich habe ihn zweimal gesehen, dann war er tot. Ermordet, sagte meine Mama. Das war im Januar 1992. Ich war 10 Jahre alt, er 26.
Well, so this is just an excerpt. The whole film is 7 minutes, and it's from 2009, so it's really a long time ago. While starting to work on the project, I realized what the story is behind that whole thing. It was about around 2009 that in Bolivia, actually the founder of the PIV, of the First International Brigade of this mercenary group, was killed by the special forces in Bolivia. And I was at that moment doing some research, so I realized that he got killed. And actually that was the moment when I said, okay, it's actually worth to tell that story from the beginning and go a bit more into details and see really what happened in Croatia. Why are foreign people fighting in a war which is not theirs? So I decided to do the feature-length film. First step, which was kind of difficult for me because I was just coming out of school, was how to find the right producer. It's always with a project, especially with a hybrid project as Chris the Swiss is, it's kind of difficult to find a producer that fits. Second problem was that, yeah, as it is not a hybrid, the film funds were kind of skeptical that it's going to work out. I mean, they all liked the project, but they said, okay, it's not, I mean, the documentary fund said, go to the fiction part, fiction said, go to the animation part, animation said, documentary, go there. So it took us some time to persuade everybody that this project can happen and that we can do it. But of course it was not possible to do it out of Switzerland alone. So we needed to find co-producers, and actually that's where you stepped in, so maybe... yeah. So maybe you can explain a bit.
How we met was... Anja was presenting the project at Doc Leipzig, and I didn't go there, but a colleague of mine went there, and she came back, and I was asking her, was there anything interesting? And she was like, nothing special, and I really like to get into the catalogs, so I went through the catalog and I saw the story that I knew of, because my pre-past was that at the same time when Chris was running through the minefields and other military activities in Croatia, I was doing the same. I was working as a fixer for TV news. I don't know if you know what is fixer. Fixer is like a field producer. So basically I was 25, a bunch of us from film school joined the ranks of the the TV agencies, and we were sending out the truth about unjust war that was happening to us. Two of my good friends, one of them being one of my dearest friends, was killed. At the time I thought in the similar way like Chris was killed. And I came across Chris twice, and we met. And when I heard the news of his death, I was like, he was not careful enough. But what kind of shook us all was that 2 weeks after, at the exactly same spot, another journalist was killed, Paul Jenks, photographer, British photographer, who was part of that group that Chris was in when he was reporting as a journalist. But you have to understand that was the time of really dark things happening in that part of Croatia. That was, Eastern Slavonia, time of Glavaš and other beautiful guys who were doing really nasty things. And to each one of us, this was like, no go. Don't go there because you might end up in a similar way. So I read the project, I came into contact with the production company and with Anja, and I said, yeah, I wanna find out what actually happened, because in a way that was paying the debt to my, deceased friend. I always wanted to make a film about him. I never did. So when I first met Anja, I said, okay, I'm going to do this film for free with you, but you just have to put his name on the closing credits. And his name is on the closing credits. And that's when, 5-6 years ago, Anja was sent for the first kind of recce mission to find out kind of the way into the heart of darkness. And in a way, although we were agreeing that she will do me as an animation character, I ended up as a real character.
And here I used to say it's always a question of budget, and you guys know it. I mean, documentary or animated characters, so.
She used me as some sort of bridge to this world.
Thank you for that bridge, which is difficult. Yeah. Actually, when you have to find money, one of your initial or very important tool is a teaser that you can use for pitching, but it also helps you to do first. To try out different techniques, to try to find the technique. So I just show you an excerpt of the teaser so that you can see how the whole process and later the design developed.
Winter 1991. I was 9 years old. My big cousin Chris travelled to foreign countries and he wrote for the newspaper. I wanted to be just like him. Now I'm the same age as Chris when he died. His story still haunts me. It's a story full of mystery, secrets, and darkness.
So that was, but sorry for that. So it's only an excerpt so that you can see a bit the technique. Yeah, first with a hybrid, how to manage this whole thing, how to find the story, how to start. Of course, I started with the researches. I had the notebooks of my cousin, and they came back with his body when everything. And his body came back, his personal belonging came back as well. So they were still with the family. And in the notebooks I had different names. I had different names of journalists, but also of fighters, or some hints who could have been participating in that brigade. I started to do the research and try to find those names. And I also find, which is not part of the film, but I think it's a very interesting anecdote. I find a script of a project that was in progress, in the financing state. It was a US project, a fiction film, action film, whose co-writer was Eduardo Rocha Flores. And Eduardo Rocha Flores is the commander of the brigade. So I wrote the production company.
He's the guy that was killed in Bolivia.
Yeah, it's a bit complicated. I'm sorry that most of you didn't have seen the film yet, so it would be a bit easier for me to explain. So this guy was the co-writer of this fictional project. I contacted the production company and they said, well, we are stuck with the financing. I was contacting them to ask if I could make intern on the set, and they said, yeah, but we're stuck with the financing, so you have to wait a bit, but we can send you the script, which is kind of unprofessional for a production company, but very useful for me. Because in the script there was the character, a Swiss guy, journalist, Christian Robert Württemberg, so they didn't change any names, and I thought, okay, if they didn't change the name of my cousin, they probably did not change the other names as well. So that was my starting point, and that's how I got in contact also with foreign fighters, other war journalists and so on. And actually quite early in the stage I started to record all my research because I was aware that probably some of them would not be willing or not be able to come in front of a camera for the second time. Maybe they would be killed in the meantime because they are still active. So in quite an early stage I started to record everything. I made a transcript and from that transcript I started together with Marian, we started a process of screenwriting. So you had the documentary parts and the animation parts, which are actually fictional. So I don't know if you want to say something about it.
Typically what Sinisha, I've been working with him for a very long time, so what Sinisha will do is when he has an interesting project that he thinks that I can help with, he sends me in the manner in which you send a bulldog against somebody. He's basically sending me to kick up a huge mess, and it doesn't usually end up pretty because directors in Europe don't really like it when a writer comes around and says, you should do this, and then you should do that. But this time with Anya, it was actually very beautiful because she had done this enormous amount of research, and I was in a very grateful position of a Balkan lazy writer saying, let's step away from the research for a moment now, and let's look at what else the story offers except for what could have actually happened. So my role during the process of writing the script was to always remind Anya that we are interested in more than just what happened with Chris and what the political or the historical circumstances were during the war, how he got involved with all of that, what he was trying to do. It was a very fascinating subject for me, but as a writer, I had to keep coming back to the question of why this is important for her. Now, you've seen the excerpt from the short film she did, what she calls the diploma film. I was really inspired by this personal sort of fantasy of what she thought as a young girl who her cousin was. And then I took it upon myself, and I think it worked beautifully, to try and infuse her documentary project with the same sort of both the feeling of a young girl trying to figure out what happened, juxtaposed with the grown-up Anya, whom we see in the live-action footage as well. And I think that was, I wasn't a great help with maybe some things I did help with the research, but I wasn't very instrumental in that part, except that I did write a wonderful scene for the two of them, a live-action scene written for a documentary part. We had a whole strategy. They never actually got to it. So that's my biggest regret.
Work with documentaries, sorry.
Yes. It was a beautiful scene. It was a beautiful scene between the two of them. It would have brought tears to everybody's eyes. We never got to make that.
But we did a lot of other things.
Yeah, maybe for
in the next project.
I hope, is it still in the script?
Of course. I mean,
Excellent.
not in one version of the script, of course, yeah.
No, but is it still in the final?
No.
No? Okay.
Sorry.
I'm done.
Yeah, so actually the question is, why at all animation, or why at all documentary, why a hybrid? I mean, I think that animation is great when it comes to subjects such as war, because it's able to find symbolic images which are very subjective, which are very emotional, especially when you want to express something which is not so easy to express. Of course, you can show, again, dead bodies, but, I mean, who wants to see it, yeah. And also we see too much in the news, I would say. But animation, I think, also has a limit when it comes, especially when it comes into expressions or interaction between human beings. I think when you use animation, when you draw all the characters, the live characters, you lose some information between the lines. You lose expression of the face, the gestures, and it gets a bit more flat. So I just want to show you a short excerpt of the film where you hopefully can see a bit better what I mean. It's a situation where I meet, more or less for the first time, 3 of the fighters, the foreign fighters, in a cafe.
Vor ein paar Jahren ist Besson nach Kroatien zurückgekehrt, hat geheiratet und eine Familie gegründet. Er ist bereit, sich mit mir zu treffen, in seiner Stammbeiz, wo auch andere Veteranen verkehren. Über Chris will Besson nicht sprechen.
The majority of the volunteers here were English,
around 140. The second nationality were French. Third one were Germans. And after that, we had a bit of everything.
Didn't we have a Swiss guy? No.
No. That's, yeah.
Yes, one.
Yeah, he died in Osijek. That's why the lady is here.
Ah.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
So I don't know if you got that. The person who's on the left in the screen is saying, "Wasn't there a Swiss guy?" And then Gaston Besson is saying, "Yeah."
No, he
That's
says
why the
no.
lady is here for.
But first he says no, and then he realizes, oops, okay, actually, it's a problem.
Shall we say something? I just want to say a small note about Gaston Besson. That's my favorite one. Gaston Besson, he lost his father when he was very young, when he was like 5. And this is when his godfather became his real father, and he's referring to him as, you know, this guy brought me up and this is my father. Godfather's name is Jean-Marie Le Pen. And that was the policy of National Front. They were sending their youth from the party to the conflict in former Yugoslavia to train a little bit.
So yeah, these charming guys. But what I wanted to say is, I mean, those situations, me meeting those guys, my insecurities, I kind of felt that this is also important for the film. And I didn't want to lose it, and that's actually why I was deciding to make a hybrid. So, first we go into pre-production when we start a project like this, and first of all comes finding the style for the animation. And for me it was very important because I was drawing a lot during my researches. It was important that those researches from my sketchbook would fit to the animation, because I had the idea that the sketches or the animation should look like if it would come out from the sketchbook. So the tricky part was rather to find a technique that is adaptable to a bigger crew, because we established a studio in Zagreb where 35 people were doing the animations. So me doing those hand drawing sketches, this style should be adaptable, or yeah, I mean, in an industrial environment, let's say. We developed a kind of a brush, which is like a Cintiq brush, which looks and which acts like as if it was ink. So it is very natural somehow to draw with it, and it kind of fitted very well. So the next problem, let's say, was to find a character design. In Animadoc, or especially in a hybrid, we had to deal with the fact that some of the animated characters are actually also existing in reality. We have some of them in the archives, so means like 25 years ago as a younger version of themselves. Some of them we had also filmed, like today. And then we wanted them to fit with the animation, and we needed to find a way to them to be recognizable. Actually, we decided to break down the character design, to choose from each from each character one specific characteristic, and focus on that, and try to find a graphical way. Actually, we don't have enough time to go really deep into that subject. It would be another talk. So we ended, if you are from the animation, you know how it works. You need to create a Bible for the animators where they know what they can do, what they should not do, how the style looks like, so that they can properly adapt. And then the next step was to do the storyboard on the story level, and to do the animatic. And in order to get to control the whole project and the dramaturgy, we needed to go back to the script and to the editing, and include those pieces of storyboard. It's a storyboard, so. And the animatic, we don't really have time for that, but it's an animatic, as you probably know how it works. So the next step was to establish the animation studio, to find the crew, to set up a pipeline which works for a bigger studio. For me, the tricky part was really that I still did not know what I was doing, because we did not shoot all the pieces of the documentary yet. At the same time, it was very tricky to edit everything, because the animation was still missing. So we were editing with black holes, let's say. So half of the film was still missing, and it was very difficult to try to catch the whole dramaturgy. So I just show you some excerpt of the making of from the studio in Croatia.
The whole animation production is happening in Croatia, in this animation studio in Zagreb. At the beginning, there was nothing here. There was no animation studio in Croatia. We set up everything from the scratch. There are 35 people working here, coming from Switzerland, France, Italy, Spain, and of course Croatia.
We rarely push the brush, we print. We print a color with different textures, so that we get a look like watercolor ink sketch painting. It's a technique, needs a lot of concentration to make the right choice for the right brush and the right color intensity. It needs a while to get into the style, because it's against the usual behavior how to paint. Sometimes it's nerve-wracking, because when you change something, it means a lot of change in consequence. It's not only that you can change one thing easily.
The whole animation production...
No, wait. Everything is coming twice, sorry for that. So, this is just a short impression from the studio, which we later had to close down. You will tell a little bit when I've finished. So, once the animation was made, we did the compositing in Germany, so we moved everything to Germany because of production reasons. And we did the sound design in Germany as well, and the Foleys in Finland. And the orchestration was done by a Swiss composer, but we did the recording in Budapest with an orchestra in Budapest. And the final editing and final color correction and so on was done in Switzerland. So I was moving quite a lot, which is for such a project kind of natural. So I just show you short excerpts from the Foley, from the voice recording, from the editing, and from the music recording, so that you get a bit more impression.
If director can say what kind of feeling he or she is looking for, then it's my job to kind of make it. That's always something I'm expecting to hear from directors, the feelings and the, let's say, colors of sound. If director can say...
It's coming second time, so sorry for that. I don't know how to...
This
terrible noise. There was this noise. This terrible noise.
Well, more or less, I can say he's a big mystery. More for me, I think, than maybe for Anya, that knew him at least as a kid and has some memories of how he moves, how he is, how he talks. And that's also why I think it's animated and not acted as a movie, because there is so much unsureness about him. What makes it very, very interesting for me.
Seltsame Gestalten bleiben sitzen. This terrible.
I was now at least 3.5 years on and off on this project. The combination of documentary and animation is actually quite insane, because it's a completely different process how you get along. So it's an opposite approach to it. I was involved already in the storyboard. We really edited the storyboards, and it was interesting for me to be part of the development of the animation scenes too.
So for me, it was kind of difficult to decide with whom in the editing I would work. Would I work with somebody who's very experienced in animation, or should I work with somebody who is actually rather into documentary, because the projects are really kind of opposite in the way how they are produced. We had like more than 300 hours of material in the documentary part. At the same time, I had to take very precise decisions already in the animation. For example, where a glass is standing. I decided to go with a Swiss editor who is very experienced, mainly in documentary. So for him it was very strange to, for the first time, edit animation, and yeah, it took us some time to. He always said, "No, I mean this storyboard animatic, it's too slow and blah blah blah," because he could not really imagine how it would look like as an animation thing. So that's where I realized that somehow, as director in a hybrid, I had to make the bridge between the documentary team and the animation team. And the same was with the producer, actually, because he always wanted to see something, and those who are from the animation, they know that in animation you have storyboard, you have animatic, and then when you start actually with the animation, you have a long period where you don't see anything. And then in the last moment, when everything is done, all the layers are put together, the compositing and so on, you finally see something. And this might be natural for you guys who are coming from the animation, but if you are dealing with a producer who is not able to read an animatic, it's kind of difficult. And each time when he asked, I mean, I'm talking now about the Swiss producer who was in Switzerland while I was in Croatia with the crew. And every time when he asked me to show him something, we just lost another 3 days just to prepare something. So actually, here in this clip, the editor was talking about this process, because for him it was completely new. For me, very important was also the sound design. Yes, I also have archived material in the film. The question was, when did I put in the archives? Well, the archives is another topic. I could talk like half an hour or even more about it. Of course, I mean, in the documentary process, if you're doing a documentary film, you are doing the research on the archives quite early, because you need to know a bit what images are there, but there are still archives which you need to exchange during the creative process of editing. So I had like the key archives also of Chris in the brigade, which I knew are very precious, and I would absolutely use them. I found them quite early. And then other archives we didn't have till the end. And then actually we had...
Some of the archives we were blocked.
Yeah.
We were not,
Actually,
almost not able to get it.
Actually, we had the problem. We had several problems. First of all, the archives were belonging to the Yugoslav TV, most of them, and the Yugoslav TV is not existing anymore. We had a lot of freelance journalists in this conflict, which are not, or which were not belonging to a bigger agency, so it was kind of difficult to find the origins.
And one of the biggest problems was that most of the material that was fed by TV agencies was taken by the national TVs and presented as their own. And then they went into trouble with TV agencies, and then in the last 10 years they sort of started pulling out this material and saying, okay, this material might not be ours. So that was even complicating things more, because you would find something in the archives of the national TV and they would first say, yeah, this is ours, and then it would turn out this is not theirs, and then it would lead into, mess.
So we had a rough cut version in 2017, April, May 2017, and me and my editor said, we showed it to people, it worked quite well, and we said, okay, maybe 4 weeks more and then we're done. And then the legal thing started. Like Sinisha explained, we thought we knew who was the one who was in charge of the rights, but it turned out to be very, very difficult. So we had to replace most of the, and then we also had the problem with the political situation, because actually the Croatian TV had the original of the archive material, which was in the best quality. We could find it in other agencies as well, but you could see that the tape was being used for several times, so the quality was very bad. We were trying to get it out of Croatian TV. So we ended up that we had to replace most of the archive material when we were almost there. And that costed us almost one year to replace everything, because as you can imagine with a hybrid, it's a very delicate construction, the whole thing. If you pull out one piece, everything falls apart. And we have like 1/3 of archives, so it's quite a lot, or even more.
And
yeah.
Okay.
So I don't know if you want to say more.
We can go into questions, really. Yes. It's always better to interact.
As we said, tonight at 7 o'clock, screening of the film at Kino Dvor, I would have a first question, because still I'm interested. Anya, how did you find Sinisha, and Sinisha, how did you decide that you will do like a crazy thing that never did before, put up a pipeline in Croatia? I guess because it was cheaper, that's from the production side?
No, that was not the reason. I mean, my reasoning was, I had this romantic idea that Croatia has a great animation history, and I was like, fuck, this should be very easy. Little did I know. We had something between 80 and 90 people coming through the studio, Croatians, being interviewed and, falling out. But on the other side, we had 22 people that finished working, and they were, I would say most of them were juniors, but 3 girls within 6 months became HODs. And this, for me, was achievement.
What were the biggest problems, Anya, in terms of like finding the animator style that would fit to your style? Because I heard that usually in Croatia, though, there is a school, there's a department for animation where they are making their diplomas authors. So was it difficult to get them to be in-betweeners and do the whole process?
Yeah, I mean, if you're in co-production, you you have to follow the rules of co-production, means you have to take the people from the countries, and I was kind of stuck with 2 countries, Switzerland and Croatia, who only has author animators. So yes, it was difficult, and thanks to our head of animation, Simon Elz, who is really, really good also, I mean, first of all in technique, he's a very good animator, but second also with the crew. He really pushed them, and he really invested a lot of energy to push them into the same direction. So yes,
in a way,
it was
It was
difficult.
also schooling, and that was one of the biggest achievements.
Just a quick question. Do you think that the fact that it was not such a long time ago, the conflict, was it like something which made this project much more difficult or much more less difficult? Because still people are alive, but at the same time it's so vivid. So yeah, if you can share that experience.
I think what we really like in the Balkans is no matter what time passes, we still like to keep our grudges deep. So, you know, this war started by people saying, oh, you know, somebody killed my grandmother, somebody killed my grandfather. So I would say that Balkans is always eager to fight. And I don't think it's, I mean, it's 27 years. If we are not able to move on, and one of the biggest things for me was like, you know, the other side is eager to present this, oh, finally the truth is coming about ugly things that happened in Croatia. And I was presented as a traitor. And my answer to that is, no, I'm clearing my house. What about you?
And also, it was just at the time when we were at the stage where, you know, the Film Fund in Croatia and the Ministry of Culture in Croatia were getting familiar and aware with the project, is when politically things got very nasty. Like it was one right-wing government after another. So we got caught into a much bigger mess. So the film itself would not have been such a big issue if it weren't for this very ugly, nasty. Like we had a guy from Canada as a prime minister. It was insane. So, you know, we were caught in the middle of that. And I don't think it matters whether the war happened 30 years ago or 3 years ago. We were just, you know, somehow found ourselves in a moment when some people thought they could use the story of the making of the film and the you know, everything that's behind the project useful for their own political gains. Turns out they were wrong.
One of our first big sins was that in one of the treatments we were calling our war a civil war.
Oh, but no, that's I don't want to. We were not. It's a silly argument.
It's actually a homeland war, and if you call it civil war, you can.
But it's
end up in prison being punished. Blah, blah, blah.
It's actually impossible to truly explain. So in Croatia, if you call the war the war that happened in former Yugoslavia, in Croatia, if you call that war a civil war, you get in trouble. But then Chris, who died in '92, in one of his reports says, you know, the civil war in Yugoslavia is raging. So we use that bit of archives. So this is from '92. It's
91.
Yeah, from '91 actually. It was before he died. So, and they still have an objection. So it's not just me saying it was a civil war or any of us saying that. They have a problem that something happened 30 years ago. There's no way you have a discussion or a solution with people who have such, you know, such grudges against words. So, you know, but again, I think that it's incredibly difficult to explain, and I don't think it would help anybody. You know, it's like fun stories now, but when you have to deal with something like that, it's really nasty business.
One of the repercussions being that 10 days before our premiere in Cannes, that we had to hide because, you know, we were afraid that they might, you know, fuck it up for us. 10 days before the premiere, the War Veteran Association asked from the head of the fund to explicitly confirm that the film is not Croatian. and he did. So we came to Cannes as the crew from Greenland.
But still, Sinisha, the selection to Cannes Film Festival then made the difference, and according after that, like also the Croatian Amusement Fund put on their website, like Chris' Swiss-Croatian co-production is screened in Cannes.
Yes, but they didn't come to the premiere.
One or two more questions, then we do a lunch break. You are.
The music. Okay.
Just a quick question, because I'm always amazed with interviews that there are still witnesses that allow to be interviewed and tell their stories. I'm thinking of the small interview about the mercenaries. So there's always a strategy or a way in making those people tell their stories. So I was thinking, did you get all the interviews you wanted, and what did you use to have their side of the story and having them say it to the camera?
Well, no, I did not get, of course, all the interviews I wanted. It was kind of difficult. There were several people who denied in the very last moment. I was there with the crew, so we had situations like that. I think it's important if you are talking to protagonists, even if they are mercenaries and I don't agree with their concept of life, I think it's very important to be curious, to get into a discussion and like mean it. I mean, be honest with them. Just try to ask what you want to know, and then you get into a discussion. I think what helped me also is, of course, that I'm from the family, and they know how it is to lose somebody. Maybe they are even feeling guilty. So, and there is also a mixture because I'm a woman, and there was also this macho thing. So it was a strange mixture.
But there's also part of the exhibitionism. They really like to show off. Sorry? No, they went through a lot of things, and normally they just speak about these things among their peers. So for them to tell this story to someone else, this is like, you know what, I've been in the war, I've seen things.
And I mean, what you have to know is also, I did these interviews before Croatia became part of European Union, and they still had the status of being heroes, war heroes. So I had to promise not to ask them any questions about Chris. They started themselves, but talking about the brigade, I kept my promise. But to talk about what they did, they are kind of proud of what they did. In their logic, it works.
And they're still doing it. Besson is an instructor for Azov Battalion in Ukraine. So he spends time there, and sometimes he brings Croatian volunteers, and then they're fighting against the pro-Russian forces that have Serb volunteers. So these people travel thousands of kilometers just to continue whatever.
The Croat-Serb war is not finished yet.
Yeah, there are even some Japanese dressing up as Croats and Serbs for paintball. Okay, my question is, the music works great in the film. It's really, really great part of the film. So can you just briefly describe the process? Because this is a hybrid, it's an animation. Did you use some temporary music or had something from before? How did you work with the composer?
That would have been the last part of my presentation. Well, music and sound is very important for the project, also to glue all the parts. I mean, animation, documentary, and archives. For me, it was clear that I wanted the music and the sound design to be very close, so that you could start from some sound and then slowly it develops into music. All of a sudden, you are in a mood of music. So the music is original music. We have like 4 songs, but the rest is done.
She was in love with the music, with the music that this guy was doing before, and she was even taking some of his pieces as mock-ups.
I mean, in the editing is very tricky. When do you insert music, and with what kind of music are you working with? Because you get used to the tempo music, and it's very dangerous somehow. So I started the process with the composer very early. Then I was also lucky that he was willing to do that and willing to experiment as well. And the sound designer and the musician, they worked very close. So sometimes it's very difficult to say from whom it's coming. And the editor, he was also working already with the with the composer on other projects. So it was a very close collaboration between editing, sound design, and music.
And there is a funny story about the song that appears at the beginning of the film, if you remember. Jesus, He Loves Me. I mean, it was the real song from the real radio piece about Chris's death, and it fitted so perfectly into the film, but then there was a rights problem, and Swiss producer kind of gave up. When he got the price for the song, he said, no, fuck it, let's remove it from the film. So like a month before the premiere, these two idiots were fighting for the song, and we managed to secure the
actually,
rights.
the day before the Dolby Atmos mastering, we got the rights. I mean, the rights were like, originally they were like 70,000 euros, and yeah.
And we got it for 10.
Let's say that production-wise was a self-suicide.
Yes.
What you started to do, and you did it until the end, and now the payoff comes just now. Actually, the film is distributed, it's bought around the world, it hits festival, it got awards in Switzerland.
And we still didn't receive last installment from Haupt.
Okay, so the story continues. Actually, it's good for the film now because it makes him
And the film is
extra.
still in the category of being censored. It's the only film in the history of New Croatia that did not pass the censorship.
But still was screened at Anima Fest Festival, at other festivals.
Yeah, but it's still like like a sword above my head that can fall any moment. And if it falls, then I have to pay back entire amount that I got.
Let's cross the fingers that...
Maybe you shouldn't have gotten the song then, Sinisha.
But Jesus, He loves me.
Yes.
And let's finish with his last word. Thank you very much for this
Thank you.
presentation. And Anya, you will be at the screening also, like if somebody wants to ask more after the screening. We do a...